Uh-huh. Sweet. Oh, Max, right?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see, cadence and
You got a guess?
oh gosh, I knew I was going to do this. So.
My name's Jonah.
Jonah. Okay. We do have clothing, so if you guys are, what we'll do is we'll get up and everybody will walk around. You can grab one article of clothing, whether it's a baseball cap, hoodie, or a t-shirt. We'll do that right away this morning here. So, Isaiah. And has everybody, well, I'll wait until everybody gets here to ask questions. So does anybody have any questions before we even get started at all? While everybody else is arriving. There. And Braylon? Okay, great. And if it gets too warm in here, guys, let me know. I'll have them turn the heat down. They've got it cranked up pretty high, so it's a little toasty.
Better than outside.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I think this is hopefully the last, maybe one more day of this stuff, and then we'll warm up. Does anybody have Microsoft or Microsoft Flight Simulator or Explain at all?
No, but I don't know these guys.
Oh yeah. I know. I've never used it. It's too complicated for me. I think it really was easier.
Well, it's not that complicated. It's not very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You just gotta memorize.
Yeah, it's the simulators are getting extremely accurate. I mean, close to real life. So I'll show you here. Just switch over to this. So this is the Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is the inside. Let me show you this here. This is the inside of a Cessna 172, and these units right here. Garmin is a major avionics manufacturer in the States here, so or the world actually, and they actually modeled their avionics. This right here works just like it does in real life. I mean, you could actually learn how to use a Garmin navigation Navcom from this simulator. It's that good. If you've ever flown a plane before, you recognize all these instruments right here. This is a newer model 172, Cessna 172, but it looks just like this in the real aircraft. Some of the older aircraft, obviously, are probably maybe not the fancy avionics, and maybe the layout's going to be different, but it is very accurate. The one thing they're still working on is the flight model, how it behaves there. So, okay. Let's see. And let's see, you are
Donovan.
Donovan. Okay, yep. I apologize, guys. I'm gonna get names messed up here. So again, mentioned last week. If you do have a question, make sure you say your name first, and then I'll get to know everybody's name. So yeah, they actually have I may have mentioned this before. I've got a friend of mine, a United pilot, that comes over and flies one of our simulators over at Bearman. He said it's actually better than the simulator they have at United. It's very accurate. So he has to program the FMC just like he does in real life. When he doesn't fly, he flies this the LA trips a lot. So, but in any case, they're getting really good. So, and if you do want to use the simulators, you can always get a hold of me. You can get an instructor in there, either myself or I've got another instructor that's going to be helping us out. Actually, two other instructors that'll sit down with you, and it won't be. I mean, you could just sit down and fly the simulator, but it's really helpful to have a flight instructor with you to kind of walk you through it, because you're going to actually have the experience of what's not doing that. So we've got a new student here. Everybody does have. Hello, how you doing? And your name is Ethan. Okay, why don't you come in, Ethan, and get you set up. You don't have a kit yet, do you? Oh, you do. Okay, great. What's your kit number, Ethan? 9. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Grab a seat, sir. Online, yeah, so.
Shooting it down at 11, is that right?
Yeah, we might get done a little bit early today. So we're going to probably cruise through 2 of the sections. We might, if we get going really fast, we might go on to the 3rd session.
Okay, sounds good. Be back
But-
before that.
Yeah, we'll definitely be done by 11 though, for sure. But anyone have any questions on your books at all, and materials, computer stuff at all, or? And how many people took quizzes? Okay, a couple of them. All right. So one thing I will mention, if you guys want to keep up with this, especially the young guys, you know, if you're under 15, you guys definitely have to work harder at this, because there's concepts that you haven't learned yet in high school. So you're going to have to, you know, definitely go through the online portion, read through your books. If you've got questions, you've got to ask. You got to ask either me or another instructor. What we want to get you guys to the point where you can, you know, get your pilot's license, but it's a little bit more challenging for you, because again, you're learning concepts that you haven't learned yet in high school. Some of the high school people that are here have learned some of the stuff in physics and math and things like that. So, so again, that and like weather theory, there's a lot of stuff in weather theory you're going to be dealing with. Physics, obviously, Newton's law, Newton's laws. You know, just a lot of other things that we'll be dealing with. So, yeah.
What chapter is supposed to be on?
We're going to be starting next week. We're planning on starting chapter 3, which is, I think, structure, but we may do that today. It's pretty light stuff, the structure. When we get into the 4th chapter, I think, yeah, that gets into, let's see here. Yeah, that is a little bit heavier. So we'll definitely save that for next week. So we may cruise through this really quick. I have a feeling, based on, you know, what I'm seeing, I have a feeling we're going to finish this class sooner than May. But we'll still have the sim sessions. We'll have flight sessions and things like that. So, you know, it's you know, it's up to you guys if you want to show up for it. Our goal here is to make sure that you guys, you know, understand the material that we're presenting, and you can go take your written test, you know, and get a, you know, I would prefer that you get a score of 85 on the written test. And you guys are all, everyone here is capable of doing that. Yeah.
That being 85 out of 100, or?
No, the questions, you're probably going to have about 60 some questions, 65 questions. So, you know, I think it could give you about 2 hours. But they're multiple choice. So it's, you have a 33% chance of getting it right. But, you know, if you don't want to go in there like that, definitely you want to go in there understanding the material. So, and this is Abe?
Yeah.
Okay. Just about ready here. can see we got a couple people logging in here. Just like this. Okay. Morning. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Good, good. Great. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear me on the line, but basically what you want to do is make sure that my screen is the largest. You should be able to do it through the layout option in Google Meets. It's an option like that. So, okay. And let's see. Yeah. Colin, right? And Hiya. Hiya. And let's see. Dane, yeah. And it's Jocelyn. Okay. A few more coming in here. Okay, so I think this is probably everybody. It's 9 o'clock now. So I tell you what we're going to do first is let's get the clothing out of the way. You guys get one article of clothing. I'll show you here. You guys online, you'll have to just kind of hold with us. Bear with us a second here. So you have your choice of a baseball cap, a hoodie here. I've got all the different sizes here, or you can go with a t-shirt. So if you guys want to do like one at a time, just come up and grab one item. That's just one you can take it with you. If you want, we can wait until after class too. Hey, well, let's do that. So, but don't forget to take one of those. Everybody gets one. And then if you definitely could wear it around, wear it at school or wherever you can. We do appreciate it because that'll help us a little bit there. So we'll probably wind up ending up there a little bit early anyway today. So. Okay, so first off, any questions? Does anybody have any questions at all? The material that we've covered the first two sessions and all? Okay, so I did go on, I kind of monitor what's going on with the SIA websites. I've noticed a number of you have not taken the quizzes yet, so definitely start taking those quizzes. Study the material. If you have trouble with something, you can always email me. That's Joe at studentsinAviation.org. I can answer any questions. Vonda Benson was going to be here today, and she got busy with family. So what she's going to do for us is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a company called Sporties or EAA, Experimental Aviation Association. They have a really good private pilot program, online program. What's that?
I use Glime.
Glime is good. Yeah, Glime is fine. The Sporties is Glime is very dry. Sporties is kind of colorful, a little bit fun. If it can be, it's more interactive than Glime. But in any case, she's going to be here, and I think 2 weeks from today, and she's going to get you all signed up so that you can get this course. It's like $300. You're not going to have to pay a cent for it. You don't have to use it, but it'll be helpful because you can take quizzes on there. You can watch their videos. They've got some really good videos in there. So it's something worth considering. And again, that'll be during the class, I think on February 3rd. And then she'll get you signed up. She's also going to get you signed up for a Young Eagles program if you're not already in it. And that way you can you take one of the Young Eagle flights that we'll have here. We'll do the Young Eagle flights. I think she's going to do some, and then I'll probably end up doing a couple. I may have a couple of pilots in there. So, okay. And then other announcements. Let's see. Scholarship opportunities. So when you guys go on the website, so there's two websites you're going to be going to, the SIA.zeroecho.com. That's where you find all the educational materials, the quizzes and stuff like that. And then there's also the studentsinAviation.org site. If you go to the latest news link, you're going to see, postings for various things. But one of the things we just posted on was that there are scholarship opportunities for just about everybody in this room. I think some of the younger people, you'll have to wait a couple of years for the scholarships. They want you to be a little bit older, maybe like 15 or 16. But that said, it's like $11,000 for one student, to get their private pilot's license. That definitely, you would have no problem getting your private pilot's license for that. So, so if you can, take a look at those opportunities. There's Vonda Benson is going to be heading that up. You apply to it. I think, Joel, are you going to be? Did you actually get the scholarship from all those guys by chance? There's somebody else. I thought somebody else here may have gotten a scholarship, but I think there was somebody that was. Anyway, they're going to be assigning these scholarships here pretty soon. You do have to apply for them. So if you have questions on it, get a hold of us. But again, Vonda is going to be in charge of that. She'll be here next in 2 weeks' time. And then we've got some other scholarship opportunities as well to get you guys your private pilot's license. Okay. All right. So let's get started. The first chapter that we're going to go through, this is just more like history type stuff, history of aviation. We don't really, you're not going to get tested on it, but it's a good idea to know a little bit about this stuff. So let's start here. So Da Vinci designed aircraft, what, in the 1500s or something like that. He had all these drawings and stuff like that. He really didn't finish it up, though. He couldn't actually get somebody to fly. It was pretty difficult. So it wasn't really until 1903, and you guys already know this, I'm sure, they're teaching in school, the Wright brothers created the first aircraft. Now, interesting note, this is probably on, let's see here, page 2, section 1, page 2 or 3 there as well. And numbering might be different on yours than it is here. So the Wright brothers in 1903 actually did the first powered flight. So there was glider flights prior. A lot of people don't realize this, but they were flying aircraft prior to 1903, but they were just glider, unpowered aircraft. There's a lot of development in Germany and in France. But in 1903, that was the year that the Wright brothers actually flew it in December 17th or something like that. Now, interesting background on those guys, and you probably have heard this, they were bicycle manufacturers. They had just a shop out of their garage, and they made bicycles. Today, the largest general aviation manufacturer started in a garage. I think I mentioned this before, too. They started in a garage outside of Baraboo. And now they're the largest general aviation manufacturer in the world. They're based out of Duluth, and the name of the company is Cirrus. So this stuff does happen. So you can start companies out of your garage and be very successful. And that's what these guys did. They just had a very strong determination. So there's some early designs of the airplanes that they have. This is more of a kite type setup. So. And then this is a picture of the Wright Flyer. If you go up to Oshkosh, they have an awesome museum up there, and they've got a replica of this, a full-scale replica of it. And I don't know if you can see here. That's probably Wilbur or Orville anyway. They're leaning down on a sliding device that they can shift their weight, and it'll cause the plane to bank left or right. They didn't know anything about aerodynamics, so they knew that they could generate lift, but that was about it. back then they didn't have, you know, the kinds of controls that we have today, like ailerons and things like that. They actually warped the wings. These wings would actually bend, the entire wing would bend back and forth as they shifted back and forth. And then if you can see right here, this right here that's a chain going up to one of the props, and there's another chain going to another prop here. And it was a very small engine that powered it. It was like 23 horsepower long. Somebody might know more about it than I do. So real basic stuff. And here we are, you know, a little over 100 years later, and sent, you know, people to the moon. So we're doing pretty good. So, and it all started from this. Aviation advanced rapidly after that. So they started, you know, creating more and more aircraft. You know, World War I, unfortunately, wars always do this. They advanced aviation and producing those stronger, better engines. You know, this is out of a need for the military to have air dominance. So they worked hard on research, and they created you know, biplanes. In this case here, you can see the aileron here. That's one of the ailerons there. There's another one on the other side there. So it really advanced rapidly. This is about like 2017, 16, 17 there. In the U.S., it wasn't until they actually established, I think, they called it transcontinental, you know, airmail route. And what this was an air route that they would fly, you know, as often as they could, weather permitting. And they pretty much flew in just about every kind of weather along this corridor right here. What they did was they actually had light beacons, much like the beacon that you see here. If you ever drive by an airport at night, you'll see a beacon. It's like a flashing blue light and then a flashing green light. They're not unlike those types of beacons. But anyway, the pilot would take off, and they'd fly, and you know, and hopefully they would see the next beacon. Obviously, if the weather was really bad, they'd have to use, you know, the dead reckoning, which means, and you're going to learn all about this. They just say, okay, if I fly this direction for X amount of minutes, I should be over this location. That's dead reckoning. And again, you're going to work on this. That's when we start using our E6B computer and do calculations. But back then, that's all they had. They didn't have GPS. They didn't have any radio navigation at all. Nothing. They did this all from, you know, basically, you know, math. They try to figure out how they could calculate to get from one point to the other. And obviously the winds would change and blow them off course. That's why they had these light beacons all the way across the country. And so they would fly back and forth there. They drop the mail across the country there. So this is an image of one of those light beacons. They call it an airway beacon tower, I guess. So and you can see the light beacon up here. This would give the pilot at least, gosh, you know, on a clear night, you could probably see him maybe 20, 30 miles away. And I know that because when I take off from Baraboo, sometimes I'll see the approach lights at Madison, you know, maybe like 2,000 or 3,000 feet in the air. As long as it's a really clear night, you can easily make out the lights. So it is impossible to see those from a distance. Okay. First private pilot's license. So I've got a couple here. Does anybody want to see these? You guys are going to be getting one of these, by the way. This is your pilot's license. So I've got several of them here. Let me just see. Let's see here. So this is my ground instructor, advanced ground instructor certificate. This is a commercial pilot certificate right there. They're all pretty much the same. Notice it doesn't have my picture on it. That's true of all the pilot certificates. They haven't started putting pictures on yet. What that means for you is whenever you go out and fly, you have to bring some sort of photo ID, like a driver's license or something that has your picture on it that proves it's you. So that's how the FAA gets away with it. It does save a lot of administrative issues. You know, we don't have to worry about taking photos all the time if people are flying. Let's see, my remote pilot's license and flight instructor card. So it's just do you guys want to see this? Anybody want to see this? I'll hand it around. If you guys want to just pass this around, you can kind of see it. You're going to get something very similar to that. When you get your student pilot's license, it's going to look probably a little more updated, more like this, something like that right there. from there, then you get additional ratings and things like that. Just done.
Would the remote control license be for like a remote control plane or like our RC drone or
Yeah, for a
helicopter?
drone. Yeah, for a drone. Yeah, and it's something that you can get started in, right away. I mean, actually, at your age, the drone pilots requirements. This is overkill. This class is overkill for drone pilots. But what you learn in here, you could easily apply to your drone pilot's license. And then the cool part about that is once you get your remote pilot certificate, you can actually charge for services. So legally, you can't do that. You can't charge for services if you have a drone and use it, say, to do some real estate shots or something like that. You won't be able to do that. But as a drone pilot with a certified license, then you can do that. You can also fly in airspace, different types of airspace. Obviously you want to be safe. You don't want to fly into Class B airspace like Chicago or Milwaukee or something like that. But as long as you follow the regulations, it gives you a lot more opportunities there. So yeah, this was a paper certificate. Now, when I started flying way back when, in the 80s, the pilot certificate was just a piece of paper. It was, they didn't give you anything that looked really nice. They just started doing this maybe like 20 years, 15 years ago, something like that. So it's getting better and better all the time. So much easier in the wallet too, because those paper ones often deteriorated. Your medical certificate is still paper. They still do that printed on paper there. So yeah, and then they go in the book, they go through a lot of the stuff about all the different organizations that managed aviation. So in the early days, it was kind of like the Wild West. They really, there was nobody managing aviation. And so when they had an accident, people got kind of concerned, and they said, well, we need to start doing something about what's happening with aviation. Thanks, Chase. So that's when the government stepped in and started, creating the, Bureau of Aeronautics, and there's all kinds of agencies that started getting developed. And as aviation expanded into the commercial realm, into airlines and stuff like that, they said we got to get serious about this, and they kept on advancing this. Now today we have what's called the Federal Aviation Administration, so it's FAA. They're in charge of two things. Number one is safety, aviation safety amongst airlines and general aviation. When I say general aviation, I'm talking general aviation is like smaller aircraft like what we have here at Reedsburg. Commercial aviation is things like airlines, the corporate aviation, things like that. But general aviation is what you guys are all getting into right now. And at some point, maybe you'll get into the commercial side of it. But we all start out on the general aviation side of things. So anyway, the FAA is responsible for the safety of the national airspace system. Making sure that aircraft follow rules when you got two aircraft, for instance, flying, toward each other like this. There should be some rule to say, okay, well, one should be able to figure out how to get out. In this case, the one to the right has the right of way, so this aircraft would turn over like this. That's what I'm saying here. So if they're approaching on like this, it's just a standard rule in Part 91. It's if two aircraft are approaching, the one to the right has the right of way. So this aircraft would either have to climb or bank over like this to stay out of this aircraft's way. So the FAA is responsible for creating those regulations, and that's in Part 91 of your Federal Aviation Regulations, or FARs. You're going to see that regulation. Two aircraft are approaching on a similar, or a similar altitude. One has to deviate. Okay? That's the FAA's job, and they create lots of rules. And unfortunately, we have to have lots of rules because sometimes we don't always understand, what we should do at certain points. So they're very specific. The FAA is, I would say that they're probably one of the most economical when it comes to language that I've ever seen anybody come when it comes to describing something. They're very specific, and they're very economical when they have regulations, when they write them out. In other words, they don't give you a bunch of extra stuff that you need to know. They give you just the stuff you need to know. The drawback to it is sometimes it's hard to understand some of the regulations. I've talked to FAA personnel that have different agreements or different views of the same regulation. That one may say, oh well, this is how you interpret that regulation. Another one will say, well, no, it's this way. So that's the drawback to it. But it's the FAA in its regulatory language, they're very specific, and you'll learn it when you start reading the federal aviation regulations. It is very specific on there. Okay. Let's see here. First FAA administrator right here. Let's go here. And oh yeah, and then the Carter years. This is in 1978. This was Jimmy Carter signed this airline deregulation, which allowed the airlines to do a little bit more of their own safety check. So what we had in the 50s and 60s, you had all these airlines, right? And there was really no regulations as far as like maintenance and or not much, I should say, not much in the form of what you should do to maintain an aircraft. So we had some accidents, and a lot of people were killed. There's some instances that had some major accidents. Procedural things. Has anybody ever heard of Tenerife Island? It was a huge. There were two 747s that actually collided, and it was I think to this date, I think it was the largest number of people that died in an aircraft incident. And I think it was around 500 or 600 or something like that had perished. So what happened was, in Tenerife, there was one plane that was taking off. It was foggy conditions at night. There was a plane that was on a runway. So here's one 747. They've just taxied onto the runway, the main runway. Now keep in mind it's foggy, right? So there's another plane, I think, that was over here on the runway that was just either exiting or something like that. Well, this captain said, well, I think they told us we're cleared to take off, and he took off without verifying anything. And essentially, and this is a quick synopsis of what happened. But essentially, that 747 took off and slammed into the other one, and they both exploded in flames. So it was a massive loss of life. That was a turning point, I think, for aviation. They realized that we need to get more involved in the safety of pilots, in procedures, things that pilots do to keep them safe. So they actually now started getting more involved with it. The airlines realized they needed to do more, because this is not good publicity. When you have, when you lose 600 people or something like that in an aircraft accident, people just won't want to fly anymore. So anyway, the airlines got more involved in the procedural side of aviation. So in other words, with the pilot and co-pilot, how they communicated and how they flew the plane, the procedures that they used. Everything today, and we'll have a United pilot or two in here to talk about this. They go through rigorous training for safety and for procedures and things like that. They have very structured environments in the cockpit. So we have what we call in general aviation, when we fly small plane, we have what we call a sterile cockpit rule. So in other words, for instance, when I come in to land, so I always tell my passengers, okay, from here on out, I won't be able to answer any questions you have, so it's probably best to be quiet, and that allows me to focus on landing the aircraft, which is probably the trickier part of flying when you're coming into land, and taking off. That's another time where you have a sterile cockpit. So those are benefits that have come from these incidents in the past. And they're benefits that I as a pilot can use, you as a pilot can use, and we strongly recommend that you do this. We're going to dive into the risk management a little bit later on here, and we talk about some of that stuff, some of the benefits of what these airlines are doing and the FAA. So in any case, that's the whole purpose of the FAA, though. They're really there to increase the safety, and then the deregulation that allows the airlines to do a little bit more work on their side to improve safety. Let's see here. So in your FARs, your federal aviation regulations, So there's like, so the U.S. government is, if you don't know, is it has a lot of regulations. Okay, and it's not just aviation. You've got regulations for agriculture. You got regulations for taxes and things like that. There's a government, or there's a book essentially of all the federal regulations. It's called the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR. And in that CFR, there's Title 1, Title 2, 3, 4, and each title, may cover a certain area. Like Title 14 happens to cover aviation and aerospace, I think it is. But yeah, Title 14 is what we're mostly concerned with. That big book that you have is just a small portion of Title 14. So that big red book. So that's a small portion of it, but that covers aeronautics and space, I guess is what it is, Title 14. So we refer to that as just the FARs, Federal Aviation Regulations, FAR. So if you hear me say the term FAR, that refers to the FAA Federal Regulations, aviation regulations, and that's what we're going to be getting into. In the future here, we'll actually have a chapter just on that. So I think I mentioned before last week, or the last session that we had, there's several different parts or these subchapters that you want to learn. Part 1, or the subchapter A, definitions and abbreviations, you should go through that on a regular basis if you can. Some of the stuff on there is kind of boring to go through, but you need to get somewhat familiar with some of the terminology that's used in there. There's a lot of contractions and abbreviations in aviation. We use them all the time. It's something you want to get kind of accustomed to. Subchapter B is procedural rules. C is aircraft. D, E, and airspace, and things like that. So you're pretty much really going to be focused on these subchapters here. The rest of this stuff, not so much so. So anybody have their FAR manual with them? A chance. Actually, here. It's that big red book. So imagine just go into this just really quick so you can kind of see how this works. So there's your FAR aim right there. And I think the first session, I think I had you guys put in those little tabs on there. Perfect. Yep. If you haven't done that, get some colored tabs, and you want to put one on part 1, which is in the very first part of it, and that's the definitions and abbreviations. There should be a tab there. You're going to be referring to that a lot when you come across a term. You're reading something and they give you a term. You can use that to look up whatever the term is that the FAA has in there. So, and then the next one is maintenance. That's part 43. It's a lesser where you don't have to have them in there. You are going to see some questions on maybe like 1 or 2 questions on the written exam from part 43. That's maintenance, and in your books it should be like page 31. Some of you may have a 2003 Federal Aviation or FAR book, and if you do, your numbers might be a little different. Page numbers might be different. The 2 biggest parts in the Federal Aviation Regulations, by far and away, and the one you should be the most comfortable with, is part 61. That's certification of pilots and requirements for flight, and then there's also part 91, which are operating rules. So if you look at the outside of the book there, you can see it's got little black areas there. So you should be able to go 2 apart, just by paging through there, and finding like part 91 is probably the largest one there. It's like that. Then I can tell it's like part 91, and it's a very thick part. Part 61, surprisingly, is fairly small. It's not terribly large, so it's got a few pages in there. So But again, you're gonna want to get comfortable with paging through this. When you actually take your written test, your actual practical test in front of the FAA examiner, they will always ask you a question that they know that you don't know. What they're looking for is to see if you can actually look it up in the federal aviation regulations. Let's see here. So that's why you have to get comfortable with this. The other thing is for safety. When you go out flying, you want to know these regulations, and maybe you're going to be flying into some airspace down by Chicago or something like that, and you want to see, okay, well, is there, maybe there's some regulation that allow me to fly under the Mode C veil or something like that in Chicago. So this would help you. You should already know that, but in case you didn't, this is where you go to for it. So. Oftentimes, pilots, myself included, sometimes we don't always stay up to date on these federal aviation regulations. It's not like the whole book is changing every year. There are incremental changes over time. You'll see little pieces of text get changed, usually trying to clarify things. So again, federal aviations, we have a whole chapter just dedicated to regulations. But I want you to start getting comfortable looking things up right now in that, because when we get to that point, what I don't want to see is, people trying to figure out, well, how do I get to Part 61? You should, by the time we do federal aviation regulations, you should already have a good grasp of how to maneuver or navigate the book itself, okay? So it's something to start looking into. All right. So there are these, what's called a Flight Standards District Office, and there's several throughout the U.S. We actually have a Flight Standards District Office in Milwaukee. You can go there if you have a question on a regulation or something like that. The FAA, my personal experience with the FAA has always been really good. Whenever I've emailed them and asked them a question about something, they have always responded. They're very professional, very courteous. Obviously, if you break the rules and you hurt somebody, yeah, they're probably not going to be your best friend. But that's, again, their job. They're there to ensure safety in aviation. So as long as you follow the rules and you fly safe, they're really there to help, and they do a tremendous amount for the general aviation community. There's some other organizations as well that do a lot, but they're the governmental agency that oversees all of this. So again, we call these Flight Standards District Offices, we just call them FSDOs. So if you hear the term FSDO, it's talking about a Flight Standard District Office, I'm sorry. And again, our closest one is Milwaukee, and I just email them when I got questions and things like that. So another thing that there's all these different documents, all this learning material that we have, but another one is the Airman's Information Manual. You already have this in the FARs. So this right here, when you look at this book right here, half of this is just the FARs. The other half is the AIM, or the Airman Information Manual. So about halfway through the book, okay. Yeah, here we go. So this is, and in your books, it might be a different number, but in my book, it's 465 is where the AIM starts. So this is something that's published by the FAA, and it's basically just kind of a collection of aviation knowledge. It is not regulatory. So in other words, everything that's in the regulations, that means you have to follow those regulations. That's in the FARs. But in the AIM, this is more informational. It's like there to help you be a safer pilot, maybe understand certain things or whatever. But it's used more as a reference. So anything that's in here in the AIM, Airman's Information Manual, or Aeronautical Information Manual, is more just to help you out. It's not regulatory. And you're going to hear me say that a lot. I'll say the term, it's regulatory. When I say regulatory, what I'm saying is that there are regulations or rules that you have to follow to do that or whatever. And if I say non-regulatory, like the AIM, that's non-regulatory. that means that it's just there as information. It's good information, and it'll keep you safer if you read through it and understand it. That said, the AIM does have some stuff in there that's probably beyond what you really want to get into. Like they've got a bunch of stuff for airline pilots. They've got information on ATC if you want to learn how to speak to ATC. They've got some good references in there. They talk about like hand signals and the different types of radio navigation and things like that. So it's a more of a informational side of it. So there's really, when you hold this book up, there's really two parts to it. There is the federal aviation regulations, and the other part is the AIM, Airman's Information Manual, or Aeronautical Information Manual. So anyway, that's the FAR AIM. Let's see here, and then there's some other publications that come out for pilots that help us out. So there's another one. It's a non-regulatory item. It's called an advisory circular. We also refer to them as ACs. You'll hear pilots talk about an AC. What an AC is, advisory circular. It's a publication. It's typically pretty small. Maybe it could be as small as like 1 or 2 pages, but it refers to something in aviation that some pilots have questions on, and they describe a little bit in more detail about it. The thing about the advisory circulars is, again, you have to remember that they're non-regulatory. So when you get an advisory circular, it doesn't mean it's law. It doesn't mean you have to follow it. It's just informational. But again, lots of really good information. This book right here, this is a big advisory circular. This is an example of something like an advisory circular. It can be as large as a book. There's the Aviation Weather Handbook, I think it is. It's about this size, and it's an advisory circular that the aviation or the FAA puts out. And again, it's there to promote safety and understanding of aviation. So again, remember, advisory circular, AC, non-regulatory. And you might see that. You may see a question in your exam that'll say, are ACs regulatory or something like that? And the answer would be no. Okay. All right. And then obviously there are pilots operating handbooks. Now, you can't say that these are regulatory, but the FAA regulations state that you have to have these on board, and you have to follow the pilots operating handbooks on the aircraft. So, but these aren't regulations. It's just like an owner's manual for a car or something like that. You're going to have this, but it's going to go into much more detail. How to pre-flight the plane. If the engine goes out, what are the procedures that you should follow to do a safe landing or something like that. So that's another type of publication that's going to come right from the aircraft manufacturer. Then obviously we have charts. Now you saw these, what is this one here? This is an Omaha sectional, but you guys should all have a Seattle sectional. By the way, if you don't have a Seattle sectional, please let me know, because when we get toward the end of the class, we're going to do a couple of cross-country flights, plan a couple of cross-country flights using the Seattle sectional, and you have to have the latest one, or at least a current one, close to this. But in any case, this is called a sectional map. And it looks like this. You open it up, and it's got basically a map of the area that you want to fly over. It's got radio navigation aids in there. It shows you all the airports. It shows the airspace. It's just like a road map, but it's like it's geared for aviation. Yes. Green Bay. Green Bay. Okay, so let me get you a.
Oh, yeah, he is.
And then here we go.
Yeah, I need
You need Seattle? Okay.
no, I have Seattle.
Oh, you do have Seattle? No, we don't have any Green Bay. Yeah, we're the only one you really need are the Seattle ones. So you don't have a Seattle? Okay, all right. And I'll have to go out to my car and get the rest of them. So if you don't have a Seattle, let me know. I'll go out after we're done with class and pick the rest of them up there. So you've got sectional maps. The sectional maps are what you're going to use when you start flying. There are also IFR charts, low altitude and high altitude en route charts that you'll use when you get your instrument rating. And that is like when you just focus on just your instruments, you're flying in the clouds. You have to reference something, when you fly through the clouds. So IFR charts are something that the FAA puts out as well. And then there's the flight supplements. So what a flight supplement a flight supplement is or chart supplement, I'm sorry. It's just a book that has all of the, airports for a particular region. So we've got one in the Midwest. Really, you don't see these charts, these books, the flight supplements so much anymore. Actually, you don't see, these printed charts much anymore. Most pilots do everything on their smartphone or on a computer or on a tablet. There's no reason to carry it. But back when I first started, I literally had to have a bag about this size that had all of the charts that I would use for flying across the country or wherever. And it was a pain because you had to keep up with those things. Like every 3 months, you'd have to get updates and things like that. So you'd have to constantly be updating the charts and everything like that. So nowadays, everything is right. You can load it on a smartphone, whether it's Android or Apple. It's a lot easier. So you really don't see these unless you're a student. So you guys have to learn how to use it. We're going to dive into those later on when we get into navigation and things like that. So, but another one of those tools is the chart supplement, and that's just essentially a book. It describes things like details about an airport. Who's the FBO manager? Do they have fuel there? What's the phone number for the fixed base operator for whatever for fueling or whatever. They've got details on that. They've got information about radio frequencies and things like that. That's in the chart supplement, and that's, again, we'll get into that a little bit later on. That's another publication they put out. Okay, and I think they kind of go into, let me just see where this is, but okay, so another type of publication are the we call them NOTAMs, and originally they were always called notices to airmen. Well, nowadays we've got, it's not just men, it's women, which is great. We need more women in aviation. The new term for it is notice to air missions. But it's the term is just NOTAM. When you hear that, what NOTAMs are, they're things that data that comes up or changes that come up to either regulations or maybe an airport closure or something like that. They're usually happen more frequently than changes to like the books. So what I mean by that, so just to give you an idea, there's a couple of different types of NOTAMs. There are, they've got some reasons. Right in the book it says there are many different reasons that NOTAMs are issued. For some of the following are some of the reasons. Like air shows, parachute jumps. You're not going to see that in a book or on a chart because they don't, when they publish the chart or whatever it is, they don't know when those things are going to go. So a NOTAM is just something they publish, and it's something you can look up online to see what's going on. So at Baraboo, for instance, we have the guy that publishes the NOTAMs is really good about sending out conditions, the airport runway conditions. He'll indicate, the snow is compacted, for instance. And he may issue 10 or 20 of those NOTAMs in just one day. The manager here is same situation. They're updating all those NOTAMs on a regular basis. And that's something, again, you're not going to see in a book or something like that. Yes. So those just be on the airport website. So the NOTAMs are going to be on the FAA websites, and you'll find them on other websites too, on briefing sites. There's iFlight Planner, and if you got involved with, are you on Lidos yet? Yeah, at some point you'll want to get a Lidos account because they'll have all of that stuff. They have the domestic NOTAMs, and then they have the FDC NOTAMs. You're going to be mostly interested in the local NOTAMs, did they close a taxiway at Maury Field or something like that? You know, it'd be nice for you to know that before you go out flying. And actually, you're legally required to know that before you fly. So here's an example of a situation. If you, you know, when it comes to the usage of NOTAMs, as a pilot, you're required to know everything about the flight prior to taking off. So what that means for you is you want to look at the weather. You want to know the aircraft performance. You know, can it take off from this airport? Can it land at the airport that I'm planning to go to? And there could be several reasons why it can't land at a certain airport. Maybe the runway's too short. Maybe the runway's under construction. So how do you know all this stuff? Well, number one, you've got the pilot's operating handbook. That's going to tell you performance characteristics of the aircraft. But also you have all these publications that are available to you, like these NOTAMs that are telling you, yeah, the taxiway is closed at Maury Field, for instance. So if I was landing at, let's say I was going down to Janesville, and all of a sudden something happens down there and they have to close the airport. I take off, and let's say I land at Janesville without permission, and I didn't look at those NOTAMs. That's my fault. I mean, the FAA is going to come after me. That was just a blatant mistake on my part. I should have looked at the NOTAMs. So you always want to look at the latest information about the airport. You should understand the performance of the aircraft. You should know that it's airworthy and that it's been maintained and things like that. And there's a whole series of things we'll get into later on covering this stuff. But the NOTAMs are a way to get out that short-term information that comes up from time to time. We want to make sure that we have those. And again, you kind of look through there. It's notices to air missions is the term, or airmen. Some people prefer the either way, but it's up to you. The one thing you're going to learn about aviation is that we use a lot of abbreviations and contractions. So it's happens all the time. So if you read a NOTAM, it's not going to be something you can just read like out of a book. It's going to be like, well, here we can see a couple of them up here. You've got this right here. Obviously, you can see here it says RWY. Makes sense. It would stand for runway. 321 is closed. That's what you're going to read in real life when you actually look at those NOTAMs. That's what you'll see. Taxiway F, lights are out of service. Ramp terminal east side under construction. So those are the types of things that you'll see on NOTAMs. But there is an advantage to you as a pilot when you're getting used to reading these contractions of these NOTAMs. When they abbreviate stuff, that means you can see a ton of information on just a single sheet of paper instead of having to read all this text. I mean, look at. Okay, so here's this right here. This one right here, runway 3/21 closed. And then look at the text over here, runways 3 and 21 are closed to aircraft. That one has much more text in it. And then here's one right here that really abbreviates. So let's see, obstruction, tower, and then it's 300, this is the distance here, and then the AGL feet there. But look at the difference between this text right here and the text here. How much more text it takes to actually fully write that out and spell it out. Back in the old days, I mean, and I'm talking 50s and 60s, they had teletypes. You probably don't know what that is, but that was just, it looked like an old typewriter and it would just transmit, data back and forth. So it was one of those things that they had to be really sparing with the amount of data that they sent back and forth. So in any case, because of that, we still use these contractions. And it's nice, again, for you as a pilot, once you learn the contractions, you can read through those NOTAMs really fast and see what's going on, as opposed to reading, several pages. Yeah, pages. Yeah, the contractions should be in there. It should be, actually be, did you say AIM?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be under the AIM section there. And I don't know, I'd have to take a look at it, but they'll have a good majority of them in there. There may be an AC advisory circular that goes into some of that as well. Yeah, that information would not be regulatory, so it would probably be in the AIM. And it's probably I mean, they probably have it in this book and some details later on there. When you stay into aviation long enough, you're going to find that there are certain contractions that are always used. Runway is a good one. RW, Y. They use that over and over again. It can be used in meteorological reports as well as other things. It's not just for NOTAMs. So there's another type of NOTAM that's called an FDC. So that was those types of NOTAMs, like about the airport, closures, changes to airspace, parachute jumping. Those are all what we call NOTAM Ds, okay, or D NOTAMs. There's also what's called an FDC NOTAM. That's a flight data center NOTAM. Those are more involved with like regulations and chart changes and things like that. So D NOTAMs are more associated, or NOTAM Ds are more associated with like what's going on in an airport or in airspace. FDCs have to do more with like changes to procedures, things like that. So they're a little bit different. And then there's military NOTAMs, which again you don't have to worry about because you really don't. You're never going to have to need to read a military NOTAM in most of your flying there. So let's see here. So again, the ones that are going to be the most common are the NOTAM Ds or D NOTAMs there. Okay, let's see. And all right, I tell you what, before we go on, why don't we take a break? We're at 15 minutes right now. We'll take a break. You guys can get up and move around a little bit. If you guys want to select, whatever article of clothing you want to take, you can do that now, and then we can kind of get into there. Then we'll finish up with this chapter, and then we'll dive into aeronautical decision making. So, all right, folks, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. We have a little organized, so try to do it by size. But yeah,
The fact that you look and pull in the picture.
he has it. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think they were going to try to fly up sometime, but the weather hasn't been the best. So it's still there, right? Just sitting up. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Joe, do you have any large selectors?
Yeah, they're, oh, boy. Either that or just the box. What, just a light?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No.
This one's gonna be used. Thank you. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
See,
Eight.
I'm seeing, I still thought that so.
all right. A few more people. Where was the?
Replacing the, I know there was one, but I'm pretty sure it got.
It did actually. So what happened was we moved it back to the SIA office. You guys are getting another one.
Yeah,
so-
'cause I know Brody left. He was like a super big player. I know.
He was
because-
part of getting this started.
I know. I can tell by just the website. I can tell by just the website.
Mhm.
He's a super big guy. I know I had him for one class because I was like playing out season or majoring in like computer engineering and stuff. And I would talk about it. Just like the sum of the software. Just kind of fun.
I know it was tough to see him go. Yeah, I really miss having the guy around. He was just a bundle of energy. You just wanted to get things done. But yeah, back in 2016 is when I actually met with them. I said, "You're interested in starting an aviation program?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So we got it going. But yeah, so the old simulator was broken. So we moved it back to the SIA office. We got it fixed up. We'll bring it back to the school at some point. But you're getting another simulator. It's going to be a big screen, kind of like maybe a little bit smaller screen than this. And it's going to be more of a generic type simulator, but it'll be easier just to hop into and practice. Yeah. So and then the middle school is getting a simulator as well.
That's cool.
Yes. Yeah. We want to get the middle schoolers involved in it. And then go from there. Hopefully we can get them interested in aviation. Start on that. So,
Yeah, we were going simulator down by the airport, close to down by Boston. So that's pretty cool.
And do you know, is that something that did somebody just buy that? It's for the school districts?
No, it was just this one like that here.
Oh, okay. I bet you the EAA chapter put it in, maybe.
I don't know. Bono was talking to me about that this year. So I went in there and it was in the hangar.
Yeah, that's we definitely want to get more simulators out there. I know they're eager to use them. I think we're missing an opportunity in schools to get people involved in aviation and not having simulators. I mean, it's not going to teach you how to fly, but it is going to give you an idea of what it is like to fly. So the best thing to do is to actually take it. Okay, and Colin and Kaya, let's see. Ready? I think, yeah, we better get started here. So, all right, so let's go. Let's get started again here. So yeah, here's a student pilot's license here, or a pilot's license. This is actually one for a flight engineer. Let's see. You have also, as one of the things in additional types of information that you're going to see occasionally is endorsements and limitations, things like that. So this is an example of a what a CFI would write down in your logbook. So it's additional information there. I don't know if you've actually have this in your book at all. I guess maybe you do. There it's on page 17. So we can talk a little bit about that. We're going to jump around a little bit in the book here, each page here. So, so one of the things too I'll jump back to the FAA, the regulations. So you're going to hear the terms category and class a lot. Category and class. So there are categories and classes of airmen with respect to airmen. And there's categories and classes with respect to aircraft. They're very different. I shouldn't say different. They're pretty, fairly different. So we'll get into this a little bit more when we get into regulations, but it's something you need to be aware of because these terms can get you confused later on when you start flying. And I know pilots to this day sometimes don't understand the terms category and class of an aircraft. So it's something you could start reading through this now. So like, there are, let's see here, go through, this is on page 15 in the book there. Let's see. Yeah, here. So under on page 15, let's see, we also use broad classifications of aircraft with respect to the certification of airmen. So there are different categories. For instance, for airmen, that would be like an example would be an airplane, a lighter than air, like a balloon or something like that, a glider. Those are all examples of categories of aircraft when it comes to airmen. Donovan, yes.
So I read on 16 that under the sport pilot category, you only need to fly for 7 hours for balloon for a sport pilot.
That's correct. Yeah.
For one day.
I don't know if you get it done one day. Maybe they could. So yeah. There's. I mean, there are. Again, it's probably because with balloons, they're not fast moving. Generally, don't have many people on board. So they may put limitations on that. They say, okay, yeah, you can take a balloon up, but you can't take any passengers, or you can take one passenger or two passengers or something. So, yeah, so it's you know, that would be for a lighter than air. So on your certificate, right here, it would say, let's see, category. They should have a category class. Oh, that would be on the other side here. Ratings, limitations. Light engine. Yeah, you would see it probably in this area right here for category and class. It would be for airship. You know, and or lighter than air, I guess is what the category would be there, as opposed to somebody that has a fixed wing private pilot's license. Theirs is going to say, you know, for a you know, an airplane. That's the term they use to describe, you know, a category for you know, an aircraft. So as opposed to a rotorcraft, which would be like a helicopter or something like that, or a glider. So when you get to certifying aircraft, which is different than an air person, like a pilot, then the categories sound a little different. Then you have examples like transport category aircraft, normal category, utility category aircraft. So it's more about what the plane can do, or what is it designed to do. That's the category of aircraft. Whereas category of airman, air person, you're going to see, you know, the type of aircraft they're going to fly. So there's a difference between the term aircraft and airplane. When you think of the term airplane or aircraft, you think an airplane, right? Well, a balloon is an aircraft. Helicopter is an aircraft. Those are all aircraft.
Looks like lighter, and then preparation says here.
What's that? I'm sorry.
And that says stuff like a parachute.
Yes, yeah, those are all aircraft. A drone is an aircraft. So again, the FAA then is getting really specific. When they say airplane, they mean a fixed wing aircraft like this right here. It's a fixed wing. I would know it, or you would know this as a high wing fixed wing aircraft. So it's not a rotorcraft. It's not lighter than air. It's an airplane. So again, it's a small detail, but you're going to hear those terms a lot, and you have to know how to distinguish between the two on there. So and there'll be questions on that too on the test. You know, it's like I don't want to scare you all the time with all these things that'll be coming up. But if you understand this stuff when you actually take the test, it's actually really easy because you have a pre-understanding of, you know, pretty good understanding of what's happening there. Makes sense and doesn't. So and then there's so we got category, and then under category we have classes. So again, there's category and class for airmen. There's category and class for aircraft. So a class for an airman would be something like single engine, multi-engine, land, water. So you may have a single engine. You may have a airplane pilot certificate. Let's say you got a pilot certificate, and your category is for airplane, and it's for single engine or multi-engine. That they're going to say that right on your license, on your certificate. It's going to say, you know, airplane, which means you can fly airplanes, fixed wing aircraft, single and multi-engine, or they'll just say multi-engine, which includes single engine as well. So if they add other words in there, things like air and sea, then we're starting to get more into the classes then, you know, of, you know, the what you can do there. So I'm sorry, yeah. And then with respect to an aircraft certification, you're going to have categories, again, of transport, normal, utility, acrobatic, limited, restricted, provisional. Those are all, again, categories of aircraft, not airmen. The classes for those could be something like, you know, airplane, glider, balloon, land plane, seaplane. So they kind of mimic the classes that you see with airmen as well. So it does get a little confusing. Again, we're going to dive into this stuff later on. We don't have to do a lot with it right now. You'll hear something about, every now and then somebody will talk about getting a type rating. Whenever you hear the term type, they're usually referring to a make and model of aircraft. So, you know, you have to get a type rating to fly a Learjet, for instance. You have to get typed in that, is what they call it. That means you're certified to fly in that plane, and you've been trained in its systems and stuff like that. So it's not just, you know, once you get your pilot's license, you can't just hop into a 747 and fly it, obviously, legally. You might be able to do that, But legally, you have to get what's called a type rating on that when you start getting into really heavy, metal there, you're starting to listen to that stuff. So, okay, let's see. They go in a little bit into sport pilot's license. I don't think any of you want to get your sports pilot's license. I mean, you might want to. It saves you a little bit of money. Honestly, for the extra money that you spend on your private pilot's license, you're better off getting a private pilot's instead of a sport pilot's license. The FAA does issue sport pilot's license. There's not a lot of them, but I do know some sport pilots. There's also what we call recreational pilots. That can be useful as well. Again, the requirements to become a recreational or sport pilot are not as great as they are for a private pilot. When you get your private pilot, you're pretty much set to start flying anything, learning as far as learning and stuff like that. The sport pilots and recreational pilots license are very limited. What you can do, they'll give you, a certain number of passengers you can fly, if any at all. You can't fly at night for some of them, so there are certain things that you can and can't do with those. Whereas a private pilot license, you're unrestricted, other than the federal aviation regulations. So, okay. Let's see here. Yeah, they go into in the book. They go into selecting a flight school, which you don't have to worry about here. I mean, as far as selecting a flight instructor, talk to us, talk to me. I can get you in touch with instructors. I'll take out as many students as I can, but my flight time is limited. Vonda she's got time. She's an excellent instructor. There's other instructors based here at Reedsburg. I think they've got one at Baraboo. Some other guys that are just independent instructors are at both airports. So there are a lot of CFIs around in this area. I'm surprised the number that we have. Okay.
I've heard of some inspectors in SOC. Are there anyone
in SOC? Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Then you're close enough to Madison to oftentimes they can just drive up or fly up or something like that. So yeah, and they've got a fairly nice airport there. They're actually, it seems like they're making improvements in that area there. But, again, we could put feelers out, but I'm sure there's instructors down there. The problem with instructors is sometimes they're busy with other things. There's really, in my book anyway, there's two types of instructors. There are the really young instructors that are working their way up to the airlines. They have to build their flight time. So what they'll do is they'll get as many students as they can, and they'll get them up to their private pilot's license and build their time so they can go on to the airlines. So those instructors actually are sometimes really good because they want to build time and they want to be really good at what they do. All instructors want to be good at what they do, but these guys want to build time, so they want to be very effective at it. So Baraboo has a guy that's going toward commercial airlines, but he's really committed to his students. I've got one of the students that was in SIA last year is teaching with him, and he's focused. He wants to get you flying as quickly as possible, safely and quickly as possible. So, and then again, someone like Vonda, who's retired, is characteristic of most of the flight instructors that are out there. They're, getting up to my age, they want to have something to do, stay involved in things. And so they will do flight instruction on the side. So there's some advantages to that too, but oftentimes they have other commitments and things like that. So it's all about scheduling. So you have to talk to your instructor about that. Find out if they're going to work for you. So, all right, let's see here. Let's cruise through this. Yeah, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about later later chapters. It is basic requirements for students, solo requirements. You've heard me talk about the knowledge skill tests. That's the practical test where you actually talk to a. That's the written test where you actually sit down and take the test. And that's going to be probably done at Maury Field. You'll take the computerized test there. That's after this course, and hopefully you'll do it within a few weeks, or when you're even taking this course, you want to take that written test there. One thing you'll see definitely on the written exam, and that is what are the requirements to get your student pilot's license. So there's there's certain eligibility requirements, and so those are again in in Part 61 of the Federal Aviation Regulations. So you want to read through the Part 61 a little bit and look under student pilots so you'll understand what those are. They talk about them here in the book. Here, be at least 16 years of age or 14 years if you're piloting a glider or balloon. Be able to read, speak, write, and understand English language. So there are just some basic requirements there. Nothing that's really earth-shattering, but you do have to know that stuff because they're going to ask you those questions in the test. Okay. All right. So the FAA is really good at putting out publications that help general aviation pilots, private pilots, but also student pilots. And one of those publications is called the Practical Test Standards, or now they call it, what is the new term? I've already forgotten it. It's Airman Certification Standards, ACS. We refer to it as ACS. There was PTS that was used back years ago, and now they switched to the ACS. What these documents do is they tell you what types of maneuvers you're going to have to do when you actually take your practical test. So again, you've got your written test. You sit down in front of a computer. You don't talk to anybody. You just answer questions. Then there's the practical test where you sit down with a flight instructor, and they're going to say, all right, I want you to do turns around a point, or I want you to do a 360 degree or 180 degree turn. Let's see, a steep bank. Demonstrate for me. The FAA publishes the actual limitations on what would be disqualifying. They give you everything you need to know in these ACSs, the Airman Certification Standards. So you can look it up and it'll say does not exceed over 200 feet in altitude while doing a maneuver. So it tells you what you have to achieve to pass the practical test. Okay, so again, that's just an example of some of the publications that they put out. ACS, Airman Certification Standards, and I think they're still in the process of converting some of those over from the old format to the new ACS. But if you look for ACS private pilot, for instance, online, you'll see the new ACS standards. And again, they go into great detail on what they're going to expect you to do, during the test. Now, the ACS, I warn you, the ACS is fairly large. I mean, not like this book or your FAR AIM, but it's got all the things that you could be tested on. It doesn't mean you're going to be tested on everything in an ACS. It means that the examiner is going to ask you to do certain maneuvers, and they're going to make a judgment call based on your proficiency in the aircraft. They're going to say, okay, this person has good knowledge and they have good control of the aircraft. They're safe, so I'm going to give them their private pilot's license, or say that they passed it. So, yeah.
How long is the test usually?
The practical, generally, it's not more than 2 hours. I mean, it might be as much as 3 hours. It really depends on the examiner. I've done some of my tests I've done in maybe about an hour and a half, the shortest of all time. And my longest one was that was my CFI. I think it was like 8 hours. It was gruesome. It was just
8 hours straight.
No, there were breaks in it, but it's like obviously the FAA wants to know that the flight instructors know what they're talking about and teach safety. So they're going to be more critical of a flight instructor or a airline pilot, for instance. Theirs might last a day or maybe 2 days, who knows? But it takes it's not something that's a short meeting, and you're with somebody the whole time. They're sitting in front of you, they're quizzing you. They want to see how much knowledge that you know and what you don't know. They probe, they try to figure out, okay, well, how much does this person really know about this? Are they safe? Are they going to be able to communicate effectively to students? So those are the types of things that they're going to be doing. So yeah, but for a private pilot, no, it's maybe again, I'd be surprised if it was over 3 hours. You may get a talkative examiner, and maybe they'll actually, they're not supposed to do this, but sometimes they will actually, give you some information that's helpful for you, after the test itself. They'll sit down. There's human beings just like, the rest of us. And they love aviation. And so they see that you have an interest in aviation, and they'll want to talk about it just like everybody else. So, but yeah, 2 hours rough estimate. So at the very end of this, there's got this thing. It says this is page 1-24, role of the designated pilot examiner. I'm just going to read this stuff. You don't really have to know this necessarily for the exam. So what a DPE is, a designated pilot examiner. So the FAA has a limited staff, right? They have people that certify aircraft, they certify airmen, but they can't be doing flight tests all the time. So if they were, everybody in this region, let's say, went to Milwaukee and said, I want to get my pilot's license, they would just be overwhelmed. They can't do it. So what the FAA does is they designate pilots, other examiners that aren't necessarily employed by the FAA, but they're certified by the FAA to do these practical tests. There's DPs all over the place. We've got, several down in Madison. There's several up north. And you can go to them, and instead of going to the FAA and having them do your test, you can request that the FAA can do your exam, your flight practical test, that is. Again, it just depends on their workload. And right now, they're very busy. So it might take a little bit longer to get you scheduled. The nice thing about the FAA, if you go to the FAA, it doesn't cost you a cent. If you go to a DPE, or designated pilot examiner, someone that doesn't work for the FAA but are certified by the FAA, they're probably going to charge because they're professional like me, whatever, and their time is worth something. So they may charge, anywhere from $200 to $800 for the test. And it'd be more likely that it would be like around $200. But you go down to Chicago or something like that, yeah, it costs more to fly down there, so they're probably charge more. Okay, any questions on the first part of it, just the history and just general questions on anything? Is good? Okay, all right. So let's jump into aeronautical decision making. This is a super short chapter. So the one thing, I'm not going to dive into this. I want you guys to understand aeronautical decision making. So the reason why we have aeronautical decision making is because pilots, controllers, anybody that's working with aircraft have in the past made poor mistakes that have cost lives and a lot of damage to aviation. So the reason why we call it ADM, or aeronautical decision making. It's just ADM. The reason why we have this now is to cut down on some of the poor decisions that we as pilots and controllers and everybody involved in aviation makes. There's always a risk whenever we do something. Coming to this class today, there was a risk that you took. You don't realize this, but when you came here today, you thought in your mind, okay, well, I've got to go there. You didn't realize that there was a risk. You said, okay, it's unlikely that I'm going to get in an accident, have a problem with something. So the risk is low. I'm going to go to class today, right? When you travel, when the weather's really bad, again, it's a risk going out and traveling someplace. So again, you kind of weigh that in your mind. Sometimes you make the decision to stay home. So with aviation, it's not just in our mind. It's written down in a book. It's a systematic approach to the processes that we use to make a decision. So that's what ADM is. And it's something that the airlines created for pilots, for airline pilots, because they didn't want to have accidents that were caused from human error. A lot of times, if you read about, what we call the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, they will have reports on what caused an aviation accident. Now, keep in mind, there are car accidents all the time. We don't really hear about it much, but they happen all the time. When we hear about an aviation accident, it's a big deal. People just say, "Oh, plane crash, whatever." It's spectacular. It just doesn't happen that often. But we want to eliminate it. And by having a systematic approach to decision making, we're going to cut down on the decisions decisions that lead to aircraft accidents and incidents. So that's what aeronautical decision making is. That's probably the most important thing as far as taking the written test that you're going to have to know. It's a systematic approach to risk assessment and stress management, essentially, is what they're saying there. So one thing I want to point out again, I've mentioned it before, but on the SIA.0.echo website, when you go in there in the sessions, when you download the PDF files for this book, essentially the FAC, Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, I've got everything highlighted in yellow and red and blue. So everything that's highlighted in yellow, you really should know. Everything highlighted in red, you are guaranteed going to get quizzed on it at some point. So you have to know that stuff that's in red. It's highlighted in red. And again, it's on the SIA website. When you click on the PDF for that, you're going to see it. You won't see it in your book, unfortunately. I can't go through all those and highlight that stuff. But this is on page 2, section 2-3. They talk about risk management. They talk about identifying personal attitudes hazardous to safe flight. All of the accidents that have happened in the past, some of them are mechanical in nature, so it wasn't necessarily the pilot's fault. It could have been. You could have a mechanical issue and it's still the pilot's fault. And that's because maybe the pilot didn't do their pre-flight checklist. They didn't see that a link was broken on the landing gear or something like that. So that would be a pilot decision that was very poor. They just decided to go, I don't need to do a pre-flight check today. I'm just going to blast off. That's one of what we call the hazardous attitudes, that it can never happen to me. So those are some of the types of things that you're going to have to deal with there. But let's see here. So risk management. Yeah. So again, read through this. You're probably not going to see much of this on the test, but you really should know this, because what it does, it helps you identify in your own self, anyways, some of the risks that you may pose to yourself or others. So I'll go over maybe just real quick a couple of things here. So in a basic evaluation you can do of yourself is identifying your attitudes that are hazardous to safe flight. Let's see. Here. So, yeah, some of this stuff, again, this is all came from the airlines and it's really good, but some of it doesn't necessarily translate well to general aviation. 5 hazardous attitudes. So if you can turn to page 2-5, there's a kind of a blue chart. Let me see if I can put it up here. Yeah, here it is right here. So this is probably probably the most important thing you'll get when it comes to decision making, is defining what are hazards to the safe flight. So one of the hazards that you'll see in yourself or in others that are pilots would be the anti-authority type complex. Okay, and this is one where I don't need to follow regulations. They don't apply to me. I'm just going to go ahead and do whatever I want to. So it's very dangerous, and there obviously have been accidents that have led that have happened because of this. So, somebody saying anti-authority. The Tenerife Island was an anti-authority. That was an example of anti-authority. So again, follow the rules. They're usually right. That's the antidote. That's what we need to do as pilots to counteract anti-authority. Impulsivity means do something quickly. So again, oftentimes in aviation, you want to kind of assess what's going on in the aircraft. If there's a problem with the engine, you don't want to just start changing knobs unless you know what's going on with it. If you don't understand what's going on, maybe you should slow down a little bit and take a step back and try to figure out what's going on. And again, those types of incidents. Again, you can look at NTSB accident reports, and they'll have instances of that. Invulnerability, again, it happens to a lot of us. It's never going to happen to me. You do something over and over again, like you go out driving, for instance, or you go in a car, with your family. You never have an accident, so you think eventually, okay, well, it's safe for me to drive everywhere. Well, no, not so. I mean, there can be, somebody else can drive in front of you. Deer could jump out. You can swerve and hit another car, or something like that. So there are, circumstances that lead to, accidents, and you're not invulnerable. Nobody is. It could happen to you. So macho, that type of hazardous attitude is the kind of person, man or woman, that could say, oh, I can do this. I've had students in the past, unfortunately just a few, that actually demonstrated something like this, where they just said, born to fly, I can do this. It's no problem. I've got it. And that kind of student will scare me. And actually, I prefer to go to somebody else because there was an incident here at Reedsburg, I think up in the Bluffs, that happened. It was a while back with a person that had that kind of attitude, and it was bad. It was bad. So, again, all of these attitudes that we see here, if they're in yourself or in somebody else, they can compromise the safety of the flight. So you really want to, assess yourself. Do I exhibit any of these right here? If that's the case, then you need to, be honest with yourself, and maybe I need to talk to somebody about it, or I use these antidotes. Don't take chances. Resignation, that type of attitude is basically, I kind of give up. It's like something's happened to the aircraft. I'm just gonna give up on it. I don't think any of us would do that, but it's, if you're in a situation in the plane, you definitely want to, take control of it. It's your aircraft, and it's an extension of you. You can make a difference, and that's the antidote to that. You're not helpless. You can do things. So, let's see here if there's anything we can go through. Yeah, actually, I'm just going to show this chart right here. This is actually a really good chart. It gives you an idea of where all the accidents, general aviation accidents, occur. So here, 3.5% of general aviation accidents occur when the aircraft is just taxiing or pre-flighting. Generally, they're not serious. Usually it's on the ground, so it may slam, maybe like in a taxiway light or something like that. Let's see, and then in flight, takeoff, 23% would be, 23% of accidents are during takeoff and initial climb. And that's not, it makes sense, if a plane is taken off, what are the problems that a plane could have when it's taking off from a little short field that's surrounded by trees? Do you have an answer for that? Could hit a tree, right? Yeah, absolutely. So, right. If the plane doesn't have enough time, if it doesn't have enough runway, it can't build up enough speed to take off. So and this just happened recently, I think out west. There was a guy that took off from an airport. It was too short. It was high altitude, density altitude it was. They took off, or they gave it full throttle, and they didn't build up enough airspeed. And they tried to lift off, and the plane wouldn't take off because it didn't have enough airspeed, and they wound up just basically mushing in ground effect. And we learned this more in aerodynamics, but basically they mushed maybe 10, 15 feet above the ground, and then wind up slamming into some trees at the end of the runway. So yeah, it happens on takeoff. So again, these are all, that was a pilot decision, by the way. That was something could have avoided.
So in the regulations for because it's just there's enough space to
yeah, that's a great question. But here's the thing. You've got, let's say I've got a chunk of property and I have just enough room for 1,300 feet, of airstrip. that's fine for getting a, definitely a powered parachute in, or, a small ultralight or something like that. I could probably get my Chief in that easily, not a problem. But the twin, man, that is pushing it. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to take off on a cold day. Probably could do it in the twin, but small plane, I couldn't, or a small, larger plane like a Mirror or something like that probably wouldn't. But yeah, the government doesn't put regulations on there though, Cadence, as far as the runway lengths and widths. It really depends on the area. It would be nice if they were all 10,000 feet, but that's so much real estate. Wouldn't be able to have it done. Yeah.
What do you mean by you could probably in cold air, but not like on a cold day?
I probably should have said that. you're getting into the aerodynamics, and we're gonna dive into that. Cold air is perfect. You guys already got this stuff. So we're going to learn about it. It's really easy, but yeah, colder air is actually denser. So the plane also breathes better. You don't realize this. And again, we're getting into the next chapter, but when you go out on a cold day, your lungs are breathing in more dense air. So you're getting more oxygen in the blood. That's why you can run for, longer distances in colder weather. In hot weather, when it's really hot and humid, the air is extremely thin. And that's why we feel exhausted when we go outside on hot, humid days, because our bodies just, they're not getting enough oxygen.
So why is there unstable wind? Is there turbulence?
Yeah, it can be turbulence. There's also upslope lift and things like that happens. You have air that flows down, cold air that flows down and creates currents. There's all kinds of stuff. And again, we're going to get that's weather theory that we'll get into on there, and we'll dive into that. That's like a whole chapter in itself. We actually get into weather theory, and then we have weather reporting, aviation weather reporting, which is like a whole other section. So there. So, but today I want to, if we can get through the ADM, then we're done with that chapter. Again, I want you guys to read it and definitely take the quiz on it. Everybody. I want you guys to take the quiz on it, and the big thing, big takeaway on this is, again, ADM is a systematic approach to these processes that we use to make decisions. So, and they've got a better definition of it in there, but it's a very concerted effort on our part to be a safer pilot. Essentially, is what it is. And the FAA has, stepped up. The airlines have really helped out with this as far as creating, ways of reducing risk in aviation. Okay, so let's take a look at some other things here. So in cruise flight, only 15% of flight time, is in cruise flight where they've had an incident or accident. Usually it's like an engine or something like that. An accident, let's say. Descent, only 2.6%. Maneuvering is a big one for you. When you come in to land, for instance, the plane is maneuvering. If you're really slow, you can actually stall the plane. We're going to get into this later on. But if the plane is coming in to land, let's say at a runway right here, if you maneuver real sharp, maybe there's deer on the runway and you bank really fast, you could wind up stalling the aircraft. And again, we're going to get into that later on as far as the physics of it. But those are types of things that we can avoid if we are aware of certain things. We're ready for them, and that's what ADM deals with. It helps us avoid the risk. You can never fly a flight without risk. Just like you can't walk outside without risk. You can't walk from your seat right here to that door without some risk. Now, obviously, there's not much risk walking 10, 15 feet. We do it all the time. We're comfortable with it. When you fly, again, the more you fly, the more you feel comfortable with it, you're going to be reducing that risk, and you're going to be making it safer for yourself and for others when you go out. So, and you're going to learn certain methodologies or whatever to reduce the amount of risk that you have when you go flying. I feel safer personally in a plane than I do in a car. Just because up there you could talk to somebody. I can talk to ATC if I have a problem, or I'm already talking to ATC in some flights. Also, if on the ground here, when you're traveling at 60 miles an hour on the highway, it's not just you that's traveling 60 miles an hour. You have people heading your direction at 60 miles an hour. So your closure rate is 120 miles an hour. So there's always that risk, there on flying. And when you're flying, you don't have those types of issues. Of course, there's other risks, but again, as long as you stay current and you practice, you could be a very safe pilot, and you may fly your entire career without an incident, or you may have a couple incidents. But if you're trained and if you keep training and you practice safety, you'll do well. So here's one other thing I'm going to point out to you too in this chapter. So if you look on page 2-8, they've got mitigating risks. So we just talked about mitigating risks, the hazardous attitudes. They've got this thing called the I'm safe checklist. This is something you can do before every single flight. And that's so I'm safe stands for illness. Am I ill? Obviously, if you're ill and you want to go flying, it's probably not a good thing. Maybe it's just a minor illness or something like that. Sometimes a minor illness like a cold and you go up and fly, it can be extremely painful. If you've got blocked sinuses or something like that, I can guarantee it's going to be painful. So are you taking any kinds of medication that may affect your judgment? We've seen that on, medication bottles, this medication may make you drowsy or something like that. Don't operate heavy machinery. So obviously plane is probably heavy machinery, so probably shouldn't do it. It's something, again, you have to use your best judgment. Are you under a lot of stress? Is it maybe you got tests at school, or something else is going on there? Is it causing problems? That stress can erode your capability for making good decisions, and especially if you go through stress enough. Yes, Joe.
Oh, why can stress do that?
Because that's a whole chapter in itself. So let's say I've got a dog. I'll just give you something personal about myself. I've got this. He's an Airedale Terrier. He's a rescue. I've had him for like 12 years. And lately, he's got arthritis and he's having a hard time getting around. So one day I get up and he is not moving at all, and I'm worried sick about it. So I had that day to cancel my appointments, and I had to take him down to the emergency vet, and they were really concerned about it. I was stressed on that day. If you've ever had somebody close to you die or get close to dying or something like that, that can be very stressful. And let's say you had to fly during that time. It's what it does is it draws your attention away from the things that cause you to be safe as a pilot. It also can help increase your fatigue, because you're not sleeping well during the day. You know what it's like when you try to take a test and you're super exhausted or tired. It's just really tough. So that's how stress can affect a person when it comes to aviation. And that's just one example. But anyway, my dog is doing fine with it. But it was stressful at that time. And that day, there's no way I would have flown, because I was just so worried about it. It's like he's around me all the time. I would bring him here, but I don't want to trouble the airport here with him. But he would just sleep. He's a good guy. So anyway, that's stress. Yeah, and it's a big factor in a lot of aviation accidents. I think a lot more than some say it is. So a good example would be, I've got to going someplace. Okay, here's a good one. So let's say you got your private pilot's license, and you got some friends, and you want to show off. Maybe somebody you wanted hang out with more or whatever. But you guys go to a Brewers game or a Green Bay Packers game, and I've done this before. It's great. You actually fly up there. So comes the day of the flight. The weather is kind of iffy, and you don't know if it's really safe at all or not. But your friends are saying, "Oh, so we're going flying today." So now you're under a lot of stress to do that, and you might be stressed enough to actually make a poor decision. You could actually, decide to take off and wind up in the clouds without, any idea of how to fly in the clouds. That's what stress can do to you. It can force you to make poor decisions, and it happens a lot to pilots. They're stressed. It's called get-through-itis. But stress can do things like that. So. All right, let's see. Alcohol. If you've had alcohol, the past 24 hours, the FAA does not dance around with you on this. If you're caught with any alcohol, they sense that you've had alcohol, that's it. You lose your pilot's license. So you don't want to mess around with the FAA. They just they figure, you know, if you do it once, you're probably going to do it again, and just don't take chances. So, fatigue, again, a little bit like stress. You get fatigue from not being able to sleep well at night. If you are working super hard at school or work or something like that, maybe at the end of the day you're just exhausted. You just don't feel up to 100%. That's fatigue, and again, that leads to poor decisions sometimes when you fly. So you can see all this stuff is leading to that that safe pilot attitude that we want to have. And then emotions. So, you know, are you emotionally upset? Did you lose somebody? And for me, stress and emotion are two very closely related things. If I'm very emotional about something, it could stress me out. Maybe I've got a client that says, "Oh gosh, you have to have this thing done for me this afternoon," or something like that. That's stress. It's not necessarily emotion. My dog might be a little more emotional, but it's also causes stress. So in any case, that's called the I'm Safe checklist. And that's something you should actually know. You'll see AOPA, Airline Owners and Pilots Association. They've got little cards you can print out with this. I use this all the time before I fly. Just, I have it, memory mnemonic, I'm safe, okay, illness, vacation, whenever I go through that list just to make sure I don't have any of those things. So again, you want to be a safe pilot, as do all the other ones that are out there. So there's a bunch of other checklists here, and they get into some really advanced stuff in ADM here. A lot of this stuff is designed for the airlines, but we as pilots, private pilots, can use it as well. So again, go through this list, take the quizzes, on there, and go through there. I don't think there's much more we need to go through today, guys. So I think we're pretty much. Let me just take a look here. I know you'll see a question on ADM, and essentially is going to ask you what is ADM, and again, it's going to be your answer is going to be it's a systematic approach to aeronautical decision making, or it's a systematic approach. I'm sorry, to risk management and decision making. So again, they've got a word better than I do there, but what we do is I'm going to back up a second. So it's a systematic approach to risk management. So you're cutting down the risk on it. So that's ADM, aeronautical decision. Right. Any questions on any of this stuff, guys, at all? Again, the FAA put this in there. Again, it's probably more than what you need to have. Some of these concepts here are geared more toward airlines, but we can all learn from them, private pilots all the way up to airline pilots. All right. So next week we're gonna dive into aircraft construction. Then we'll dive right into the Bernoulli's law and Newton's laws and things like that. So I would say do practice, work on chapters 3 and chapters 4 for next week. And we should be able to cut through that. You don't have to take the quizzes by next week. If you can, that's great. I see a lot of you are actually going on to taking the quizzes in later chapters. That's perfect. That's great. But again, definitely read the books. For those of you that are under 16, you're going to have to work a little extra harder in this, because again, some of these concepts you're not going to have down, because the older students have been taught some of this stuff already in school. So just do the reading that you can, highlight, write in the books. If you have questions, again, Joe at studentsinAviation.org. Gosh, I don't think there's anything else that I have. Any questions at all? There. Scholarships. The other thing too is definitely check the studentsinAviation.org website. The latest news on there at the very top is a link that says latest news. We'll post information about scholarships as we get them. We'll post information about the class, and then obviously the SIA.zeroecho.com, the learning website. I put announcements in there if there's going to be any cancellations or other things, and I'll put them there. The other thing I would like everybody to do, if you can, go to the SIA.zeroecho.com website and update your profiles. I want to make sure I've got everybody's photo in there, and the profiles are updated. So like your birth date, what age student you are, that's really helpful for me. So if you can go to the profile section of that and update your profiles, that's very helpful for me. Who have I not taken a picture of yet? Is there anybody here? Okay, Ethan, right? Okay. So get your photo. Everybody else, I think I've got photos of here. All right, we're good. And then as far as the clothing, guys, if you can wear them outside. We want to get some more young people involved in it. We'll probably have another class, hopefully maybe this year even. We'll go from here. So, all right, very good. I think we're done. Guys.